All right, gonna call this meeting to order. Kyle, right? Kyle? No, am I calling Cam? I Kim want to call him Kyle.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is my pleasure to welcome Kyle Darrington, who is going to give us a work session on electric vehicle transition adoption plan. Kyle?
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for having me today, and thanks for coming together tonight for the work session. Tonight we're going to be discussing staff's transition plan to start transitioning some of the city's fleet vehicles to electric vehicles. Generally, what we're looking for from council tonight is this something you'd like to see in the fiscal year 23 budget and in future years? At the end, kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down, or changes or modifications to what we put forth so far. That's kind of what we're looking at this juncture. So first off, let's start with the why. So the third key performance area in the 2021 strategic plan under the infrastructure tab here, the second goal would be to replace North Kansas City's fleet vehicles with hybrid and electric vehicles to ultimately work towards the goal of a green fleet. And that's kind of the objective of this plan would be start moving towards that. Outside of the strategic plan, one of the goals would be to ultimately save money on fuel costs. As we know, the cost of fuel is skyrocketing, and we don't really necessarily know where it will be going in the future. So that's another one of the main objectives that we could solve by doing this. So now that we understand the why, let's look into some of the context behind why we'd be doing this. The city almost always has fleet vehicles slated for replacement on the capital improvement side here. And at this juncture, we've determined that 4 of those are conducive to EV replacements, and I'll get into those specific vehicles and the reasons why in a few slides here. From a macro perspective, most of our city's fleet vehicles are pickups or SUVs, and as we know, with fuel prices rising, those are gas guzzlers. They use up a lot of gas, and we're currently retooling our operations budget for gasoline, and that's something we've been having to take a very hard look at over the last couple weeks. And this might be, one solution to that problem in the long run. And ultimately, we're looking at electric vehicles or hybrids as replacement options. Specifically, this plan looks at electric vehicles, but at the end, I'll kind of give a menu of options here to look as other options for replacement other than EVs if you decide.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Go for it.
How many total vehicles do we have in our fleet?
Total vehicles in our fleet. I had a very lengthy list of everything on our insurance. It's not currently up to date because a lot of them have been going to auction. We've been moving them around internally. 3 or 4, maybe 5 dozen. I don't have an accurate number at the total amount right now.
Hey, you're gonna make me do math. 3, 4, 5 dozen.
Yeah. Because some of them we have out to auction, and later on in the main session tonight, I know Kevin will be switching some of his vehicles over to Kansas City.
Perfect. No, thank you. Thank you, Keaton.
Of course. So next, what's on the replacement schedule that we're looking at so far? So from Public Works and specifically Buildings and Grounds, we have the 1997 Public Works Chevrolet truck, also known as Goldie. It is the last gold fleet vehicle the city currently operates before they were switched over to the red color here. To put it into perspective, that car is older than I am. So, a lot of these vehicles that we're slating to replace, the parts are getting expensive, labor's getting expensive, and their time has come. We also have from the water plant, we have their Dodge Ram, their Ford Ranger, and the Ford F-150 they use as the water meter truck when they go and check water meters. So let's jump into some of the costs here. This is specifically for fuel. Right now, as you see in the blue here, this chart was printed and released to the public in December of 2021, so I'll get to a current fuel chart here in a second. But as you can see, comparing the cost of gas and diesel compared to electricity, obviously the cost of gas and diesel fluctuates significantly more than the price of electricity, which is relatively flat. In the second chart here, you'll see on the right, this is the current retail gasoline prices across the country. And as you can see on the far right, that's where we're at the the peak of that mountain there. The diesel's going over $5 a gallon, and it's much easier to project your operational costs when you're looking at things like electricity because the price doesn't fluctuate very much.
Quick question on that.
Yeah.
What was the left side of that graph? Is dollars per GGE? What is GGE?
Some sort of gallon equivalent. I forgot
Gas
that.
of gallon gas equivalent?
I believe so.
Sounds good.
So I went ahead and put together some cost-saving estimates for the 4 vehicles that we propose to be replaced with electric vehicles. And it's also of note that the electric costs might be slightly inflated. And the reason why I did that is because we haven't used these operationally yet. So I tried to create a very high floor for what the electric costs will be, and most likely in actual use it'll be much lower. So the way I put together the electric costs where I assumed that you'd be charging your battery 100% from 0 to 100 every night for 365 days a year. And the Department of Energy estimates that it costs around $12 per charge to go from 0 to 100% on the standard EV battery. Yes, sir.
Next question. Did you factor maintenance into any of this, or put together a chart of what, if you include the maintenance of a diesel or a gas vehicle versus an electric vehicle?
I did not include maintenance. Is a lot of these new electric pickup trucks that we're looking at, they're brand new and rolling off the lines. We don't really have good estimates on how much it will cost to actually, work on the electric motors and such, because they're so, relatively new to the consumer market that it would be kind of hard to give you an accurate projection of that.
Okay, so this isn't touching broadly across all different types of vehicles. This is mostly looking at what we're looking at replacing
Yes.
in the next
Yes,
year.
this would be specific to the 4 vehicles we
Okay.
look at replacing.
Perfect.
So
Thank
then
you.
with
Thank you.
Oh, of course. So then I did fuel projections at 2 different price points. One would be at $3.25 a gallon for the 4 vehicles. Comparing that to the high floor electric, we'd save about $1,800 in fuel per year. And if you're looking at current prices as of last Thursday, which was $4.54, you'd save about $9,500 total in fuel costs for all 4 vehicles. So that's not each individual vehicle, that's the 4 vehicles combined. So now that we understand kind of the costs, and I'll get to the capital costs of the infrastructure that it would take to put in place in a few slides from here. But looking at the implementation, what would conversion to these actually look like for our operations staff? So after speaking to Dwayne Marusars from Municipal Services and John Sponsler from our water plant, I gathered some recommendations on how we could actually use these, and also with the administrative side as well. We recommend a gradual introduction implementation. We generally recommend following the existing replacement schedule. Our replacement schedule goes out for 5 years in advance, so we can accurately forecast how much money we'll be spending in capital costs every year. So we recommend following that replacement schedule that's put together by each department years and years in advance. Also, we'd like to focus on items that don't hinder operational integrity. It's vitally important that we provide the best services to everybody, and we recommend not replacing vehicles with EVs for the for the sake of just replacing with an EV if that's going to cause issues to our operations staff carrying out their duties every day. And one thing I'd like to say is that we want to keep in the back of our head that EV technology is rapidly evolving and the prices will go down eventually as these products gain larger market share in the overall market as the prices become more competitive for both battery production and other things of that regard. So let's look at some of the infrastructure upgrades that would take to start accommodating EVs in the municipal fleet here. If introduced, some necessary infrastructure we'll have to buy and install in order to keep these operational. First would be AC charging stations. Those are like the ones that you see that ChargePoint operates in conjunction with Evergy across town. So it's kind of the same type of infrastructure there, except it's significantly cheaper due to the fact that it's not publicly available. It's the the contracts are much smaller in scale. We'll also have to pay for charging station ancillary equipment. That's generally software and hardware maintenance that you have to pay per year is just part of the standard contract. Those usually run for 5-year increments. Also, we'll have to pay for electrical wiring and professional installation of these infrastructure pieces as well. The good news is that we've already reconfigured electrical subpanels at the Buildings and Grounds building for a completely different reason. They're having issues with their garage doors not working, so they went ahead and retooled all their panels, so we won't need to buy a new panel to accommodate those at the Buildings and Grounds facility. We also received brand new subpanels at the water plant as part of their existing renovation, so we won't need any additional electrical infrastructure to accommodate these. So some more operations recommendations here. After compiling, the opinions and research and such of staff at multiple levels, they've kind of come to the conclusion that these initial EV purchases are not recommended, or they should not be used for emergency response, frequent use outside of standard operating hours, or hauling heavy equipment. And kind of the rationale behind these is that, for instance, with our police vehicles, we're running them almost 24 hours a day, and the EV battery charging time, which takes around 8 to 10 hours, is not conducive to keeping those vehicles running all day. And that's kind of the same mental framework for the frequent use outside of standard operating hours. We have to give these things time to charge every day. So, for anything after 5 p.m., you're going to need something gas-powered because you'll need it, in an instantaneous moment. So that's kind of our thoughts of the operations staff at this moment of implementing them into their fleet. So you say, oh, this is all great. So where are we actually going to park these things? So we've dedicated one spot at the Buildings and Grounds facility. They'll get one EV truck. They'll be stored indoors inside their workshop within the secure area. And then we also, as part of this plan on storing 3 outdoors within their secure perimeter fence, so people can't go and unplug them overnight and things of that regard, so people won't be tampering with the equipment. Going forward, if EVs are adopted by the city and at some point the electric vehicles or the vehicles slated for replacement that are stationed at City Hall eventually will be replaced. So at a specific time going forward, we've recommended cording off specific parking spots for EVs and their chargers. We currently don't have any City Hall-centric fleet vehicles slated for replacement at this time, but this is something we'll have to think about going forward to make sure that we keep on top of all of our infrastructure needs to keep these going. So now let's get into the per unit cost and start looking at the capital costs here. So the AC chargers cost between $2,000 and $4,000 each, depending on which brand would win a bid, or if we would to attach on to another organization's procurement contract. So those would give us around 8 to 10 hour charging times, depending on how much use the electric vehicles have been used the previous day. And I've heard some questions about those superchargers that will charge the vehicles between 2 and 4 hours. The base price of those is $50,000, and on top of that is $75,000. So at this point, being good fiscal stewards of the city and kind of looking at the scope of our EV replacements, we don't necessarily recommend using those at this time, as we can allow for those 8 and 10 hour periods to recharge our vehicles overnight. The pickup trucks that we're looking at start at around $39,000, but we can get fleet pricing on those so we can save money directly from the manufacturer at that point. But that's some kind of the base per unit costs of some of these items. So compiling a total cost estimate, we anticipate chargers costing $10,000. Professional installation from a licensed person from whatever manufacturer we decide to go with will cost about $3,600. And then getting the electrical components wired by a professional electrician will cost us around $6,400, putting a total overhead capital cost of $20,000. Four. And then the yearly operational costs will be $1,600 a year. You do 5-year subscription plans with those, and those include maintenance and the access to the network that these manufacturing companies use to track all of our data, so then we know how much voltage we're using and how many times we're charging, and key data points of that regard. So I know Kim's very timeline oriented and putting the timeline forward. So due to high demand, a lot of people want electric vehicles, and just all vehicles in general. We're anticipating it'll take at least 18 months to receive vehicle orders once we place them. Like I said, there's a computer chip shortage. There's a lot of people wanting to buy cars, especially these electric trucks that are just coming out. And now that they're being offered in a fleet package, a lot of other cities and other government agencies are going to want them as well. So we just kind of want to give, a pretty accurate estimate of it's going to take a little while to get these.
On that, is there an opportunity to jump on one of these other governmental entities, jump on one of the packages and add to the order? Maybe through, I'm going to throw out Mark, but maybe any other number of jurisdictions or other organizations.
I think we can piggyback on pricing. I don't know if we can cut in line with them. Does that make sense?
I always try. No,
We can definitely try.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's the general timeline we're looking at. actually acquiring the pieces of hardware to the charging hardware and et cetera. We'll get that way before we actually get the real vehicles. So I just want to put, and it's going to take a little bit. So it wouldn't be a good staff recommendation if we didn't give you some other options, give you a little bit of a menu to work off of here. So if you don't like the EVs, after speaking with operations staff, we can go with gas-powered hybrid vehicles. That also goes in line with the strategic plan as well. But there's no charging infrastructure required. However, those still use greenhouse gases. So depending on which part of that strategic land plan or plan line that you would like to use, going forward, if you want to go with hybrids, it's totally fine. If you want to go with electric vehicles, totally fine as well. We'll just have to look at them in a little bit different lens on how we're going to procure them and keep them operational. The good thing is domestic manufacturers now produce hybrid pickup trucks as well. So it's not just electric. Hybrids are also an option. I wanted to let you guys know that as part of this plan. And fleet pricing ultimately is available for both electric and hybrid vehicles.
Councilmember Saber.
So there's the same timeline in terms of the hybrids?
I believe so. There's a general chip shortage.
Maybe 18 months.
Yes. It's still taking a while to get gas-powered vehicles as well.
Can you pull your mic up as well, just so everyone can hear you there? Perfect, thank you.
Do you have any other questions, comments?
Here, right? No, you got more. This is it.
This is it.
Oh, this is it. Okay. So I'll hit on one thing I know I've already brought up to you, brought up to Kim. As we do these things, I think it's always important that we have some specific goals, targets, things we're looking to do, and also some baselines. So, if our goal here is to reduce fuel, reduce emission, I'd like to see us have a better way of tracking what that currently looks like in terms of our fleet. To know, so I can look back in 5 years and say, did this work? Did this not work? Or are we seeing a difference here? I think it helps, understanding, where we are today.
Gotcha.
I have more to add, but I'll kick it around here. Councilmember Smith.
First off, thanks for prepping all that. I know it's a lot, and take a breath. You did a great job. Great
Thanks.
presentation. There's a number of things that caught my eye. You mentioned that you kind of maxed out the cost to give kind of a worst-case scenario, charging everything 0 to 100, 365 days a year.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do any kind of like a realistic analysis, 5 days a week for, 20 or 75% charge?
No, I did not. And kind of the reason why, honestly, the $12 figure that we're looking at is something that the Department of Energy says. However, in actual practice, we don't actually, it's going to be somewhere around there.
Sure.
I just wanted to give the highest floor possible because I didn't want to over promise
Sure.
and under deliver.
Sure, I appreciate that.
But I can certainly look into that, but I just wanted to make sure we have a very solid floor to work from and go from there.
Okay. I'm a numbers guy, so I like to kind of map out the most likely scenario, and averages are just that. We don't know if we're going to be average or below, above. But as far as this goes, we talked about doing the green fleet, obviously trying to get rid of greenhouse emissions, and in the process, hopefully save some money. Have we looked at anything to offset the actual electric costs, like putting solar panels on City Hall or putting solar panels on some of our existing buildings?
I believe we already have some solar panels. However, I don't have accurate numbers on how many kilowatt hours that we've saved.
Okay.
Per se. Does Kim have?
No, I don't. In fact, I would probably need to get with Dwayne to see how many more solar panels we would need to install to offset our power consumption with these.
Okay.
There would be a little bit of a moving target.
Absolutely, and if they're charging at night, we would also have to have battery storage that would then hold the AC charge. But with batteries, you can charge DC to DC and cut out some of that extra cost. The other thing that the mayor asked about is, I think you asked about the maintenance. One thing about the evolving tech is that the batteries will need to be either replaced or the vehicle gets replaced. And do we know the average life of a battery in an EV right now?
So we're looking at the a domestic EV pickup truck, and since they are brand new, and we were looking at specific fleet pricing. I don't have a menu there. I think it's all a lot of it's gonna have to deal with demand because a lot of people are gonna be buying these trucks and the prices are gonna fluctuate.
Sure.
So I don't have replacement battery costs. That's something I can compile. However, I was just trying to kind of the overhead at this point. And,
Sure.
operations can kind of go from there. And figure.
Okay. And I don't expect you to have all these answers, just things to look at. What about incentives? Are there incentives for electric vehicles that would be offered from the federal level, or what do we know about that?
So I was looking at the state of Missouri. They don't have very many comprehensive ones from the state specifically.
Shocker.
And since we're a public entity, I was trying to look into the tax credit. However, as a government entity, we don't pay taxes. So,
Sure.
That vehicle of garnering some of our money back isn't there.
Okay.
And I tried to look and try and scour it everywhere, but since Missouri doesn't offer them, and the tax credit is meant for more private use, we don't have very many options when it comes to that.
Okay. Do you know, you're a student of bills and things. Do you know the infrastructure bill? Does it have anything in there?
I'd have to look through the 25,000 pages.
Go for
again.
it. Okay.
You never know where things fit
Yeah, you
sometimes.
got nothing else going on.
Yeah, I got a lot of free time.
Okay, I think the last thing is, you mentioned the chargers. I think in the one slide you had them at 2,000 to 4,000 per, and then the 4 total to 10,000.
Yeah.
But what struck me is the fast charge cost, the DC supercharger. Are they really that, like more than 10x the price?
Yes. So I spoke to ChargePoint the other day. In that final chart there you saw at the end with the chargers and such, I tried to base that. They didn't give us a quote, but they gave us a pretty good estimate. And that's kind of the base that I use for those numbers. And I was talking to ChargePoint, asking them about that, and they said, the hardware is $50,000. With the installation, it's $75,000. So,
Yeah.
and with kind of the scope of the amount of EVs we're buying at this point, that's why staff doesn't recommend that, because the capital cost doesn't necessarily,
Yeah.
it doesn't offset at that point.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to see maybe get with Nick and have the numbers tightened up and projected out over the fleet replacement timelines that are already kind of predetermined, do a little discounted cash flow and see what we look like between sticking with gas, going hybrid, and staying solar, just bam, bam, bam. And if it's going to cost more, then we balance that with how much good we're doing. I mean, is it worth it? So appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Councilmember Saper.
Did you see anything in terms of emergency response vehicles for hybrid emergency response vehicles? Has that arrived, or is that something that is not really available?
So I spoke to Chief Freeman. They've been testing out a hybrid option for a year or two at this point, and there's money set aside in the capital budget for that. They're still trying to come to a conclusion as a department on whether that would be something they'd like to see in the future. But I know Chief Freeman has looked at those in the past, yes.
Thank you.
I mean, it looks like there may be some things around infrastructure taking a light look, but eligibility and where that goes is that's a whole nother rabbit hole. Unless you want to sit here and do this live action for like 7 hours.
I do not.
Okay, didn't think so. Further comments over here? That look like a maybe. Yeah. Okay. Well, just make sure we're going forward to. I do want to make sure we do have some sort of actual policy in place to kind of make sure that we're not having to do this every year, and this isn't something we're looking at every single time. Here's our 4 vehicles. And I know I've kind of talked to both of you about that, kind of looking at the hierarchy of, what are our goals? Can you find something that reduces fuel use? Well, obviously you'd start with eliminate electric vehicles, but kind of working your way down the opposite way towards even just fuel reductions, getting more fuel efficient vehicles across the fleet. Obviously some of our heavy equipment, heavy duty stuff, that's not available at this time. So can we look at options to make sure we're at least reducing the emissions, reducing the fuel, and making sure we have a policy in place to, we're looking at all these things. Go ahead.
One thing that Councilwoman Toll had mentioned in the past that I didn't want to get past is the maintenance equipment, the leaf blowers and the weed eaters and the trimmers, mowers, all that. If those were able to be battery powered or electric rather than gas powered, I don't know where we're at fleet wise on those.
That's something that Dwayne is researching, of what components of his operations, the equipment can be converted.
Okay.
So I do know that the fire department has converted some of theirs to battery operated, and I know Dwayne is researching what can be done in his cadre of tools
Sure.
to convert to electric.
Battery technology's come a long way on those too, and the noise pollution aspect of it, where you're not deafening half the city when we're trying to do mowing. So, be good.
just to kind of close there, obviously like to see some sort of policy going forward. Also like to see probably a little bit more organization, organize this a little bit more into an action plan, so something, we can continue to carry forward. Outside of that, what are your questions for this evening? Is this something you'd like to see in fiscal year 23? Sounds like, oh,
I mean,
she does have some.
is the question the 20,000, right?
Yep.
Because what's so hard about this is that it's 18 months out before we can really think about something being a reality. So it's like, yeah, right. And I think setting up that infrastructure and sort of taking that for the 4 vehicles is kind of a worthwhile risk. It's not saying, okay, across the board, we can see how that goes, see how those are used, kind of plan for that. Hope all these vehicles last another 18 months, which it sounds like Goldie is
Goldie.
going to take it home. So yeah, this is for the 20,000 toward the charging station, correct?
Correct, and the fact that we would look to replace those 4 with EVs, so
Right.
we. and
Which would be
again-
like down payments, correct?
Correct, yes, so
Yeah.
we would need to forecast what the vehicle replacement cost with those would be, EV versus gas, which would be a little bit more money than what a gas vehicle would be now, so.
All right, so sounds like, sure. And interested in hybrids instead. Where that fits, but I don't know where else.
So throw it in the budget, and then I'd like to see the cash
Yeah.
analysis, see what they can whip up.
Perfect. Further guidance or direction you're looking for this evening, Kyle?
Nope, we're just looking at, do you guys want the budget? If so, yea or nay? That's kind of what we're looking for today.
There we go. I heard some yeses there. Oh, go Kim.
Oh, no, I'm just going to say congratulations to Kyle. I thought you did a fantastic job. This is part of his internship, is to give a recommendation to the governing body. So congratulations, you did a fantastic job.
Yes, thank you, Kyle. Appreciate the work. I know you put a lot of hours into this. I saw him staring at spreadsheets, all the vehicles, and kind of aggregate all these things for several weeks now. So good to see your work alive here, and thank you. With that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay, there's some sort